Mum, perfect timing. We were just finishing up. We each took a category. That is what my daughter said when I walked into her kitchen with a coffee cake still warm in my hands. I stood in the doorway holding a glass plate covered in foil, and on the table in front of my two grown children was a printed spreadsheet. Wide margins, neat columns. My name was not at the top of it, theirs were. I am Ruth. I was 71 years old that Sunday, and I had spent the morning greasing a pan and measuring flour, the way my husband Raymond used to like it, a little extra cinnamon, because I thought I was going to a family lunch. Raymond had been gone 2 years. He was a land surveyor for 38 of them, a quiet man who measured things carefully and never guessed when he could know. We had a house he and I paid off together, 11 acres of good land behind it that his own father had walked, and a savings account that had taken us 4 decades to build, one careful deposit at a time. I set the coffee cake down on the counter because there was no room for it on the table. The table belonged to the spreadsheet. "Come sit," my daughter Diane said, patting the chair beside her. "We didn't want to overwhelm you with the whole thing at once, so we divided it up. David's handling the house paperwork. I took the accounts. We just need you to initial the columns so we know we're all on the same page." I looked down at the paper. There were rows for the house, the land, Raymond's truck, my mother's ring, the savings account, even the life insurance. Beside each row was a name. Beside the land it said David, possible sale. Beside the account it said Diane, add signer. They had made a project of my life. They had assigned themselves tasks. They had a shared document. My son David would not quite look at me. He turned his coffee cup in a slow circle on the table, the way he had turned every uncomfortable thing since he was a boy. "It's just planning, Mom," he said, "so nothing's a mess later." I did not raise my voice. I have never been a woman who raises her voice. I smiled, and I said the smile felt true, and I asked if I could take the spreadsheet home to read it carefully, because I read everything carefully. That was the only true thing I said in that kitchen. Diane hesitated, then said, "Of course," and slid it across to me. I put it in my purse next to my checkbook and a folded church bulletin from that morning. I ate one small piece of my own coffee cake standing up at the counter because no one had made room for it. Or for me. That night, I did not cry. I sat at my own kitchen table under Raymond's clock, and I took out a small notebook I had never used. I wrote one line at the top of the first page. They divided it up. Not one of them asked me for the key. Then I began to make a list of my own. I want to be fair, so I will tell you it did not start with the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was not the beginning. It was the rehearsal I had been invited to without knowing my part. The first thing was Raymond's tools. 3 weeks after the funeral, before I had even washed the last of the reception dishes, David came over with a trailer and cleaned out the garage. He said the tools were just gathering dust and a young fellow from his work could use them. He did not ask. He handed me a mug of my own coffee and told me it was one less thing for me to worry about. Raymond's surveying transit, the one in the wooden case, went out the door in the arms of a stranger. I told myself David was grieving in his own way. Men clear things when they hurt. The second thing was the account. Around Christmas, Diane sat me down and explained, very gently, that I should add her to the checking account. "In case something happens," she said. "In case you fall and can't get to the bank." She had a form printed out already. I told her I would think about it. She said, "There's nothing to think about, Mum. It's just being smart." I told myself she loved me and was frightened of losing me. That is a kind thing to tell yourself. It is also a way of not looking at a thing directly. The third thing I only understood later. In the spring, I heard David on the phone in my own kitchen, talking to someone about the acreage. He called it the family's investment. He said a man could get a real price for land like that if the timing was right. When he saw me, he laughed and said it was nothing, just talking. I told myself men talk. Raymond used to talk about selling the whole world and then restake a fence post at 7 in the morning and never mention it again. They are busy, they mean well. It is only one holiday. He would not let it go too far. I had a whole shelf of sentences like that, and I dusted them every week. David never once said no to any of it. He did not make the spreadsheet, but he printed it. He set a place at that table for the sale of his father's land, and then set a place for me right next to it, as if I were a line item that could be persuaded. By the time I laid that spreadsheet flat on my own table under Raymond's clock, I understood those moments had not been separate at all. They had been practice. I did not sleep much that first night, so around 4 in the morning I turned on the kitchen light and looked at the spreadsheet properly. There was more than columns. Down at the bottom, in smaller type, someone had made a second section and titled it Timeline. I put on my reading glasses. Spring get land appraised, done. So it was already done. A stranger had already walked Raymond's land with a clipboard while I watered my tomatoes, and no one had told me. Summer Mom signs POA, Diane to arrange, power of attorney. They wanted me to sign my decisions over to my daughter, and they had scheduled it like a dentist appointment. Fall list acreage if market holds. I sat very still. I have felt hurt many times in my life. This was not that. This was the cold, clean feeling of finally seeing the outline, of a thing I had only felt the edges of. The hurt had been a fog. This was a map. I remembered what Raymond used to say when a client argued with his measurements. The stakes don't have feelings, Ruth. They just tell you where the line is. I needed to find my line. The one man alive who knew that land as well as Raymond had was Walter, his old surveying partner, retired now, out past the reservoir. I called him at a decent hour and asked if I could come by. He did not ask why. He said the coffee would be on. Walter's kitchen smelled like every good kitchen I have ever known. I laid the spreadsheet on his table, over the oilcloth, and I watched his face while he read it. He was quiet, a long time. "Ruth," he finally said, "do you know what your name is on and what it isn't?" I told him I supposed the house and the land were mine and Raymond's. He shook his head, slow and kind. "Not Raymond's. Not anymore. Yours. Raymond and I recorded that deed ourselves at the courthouse the year he retired. The house and all 11 acres are in your name alone. There is no co-owner on that land. There is no one who can sell an inch of it, but you." I felt something move in my chest. "They had it appraised," I said. "A man can appraise the moon," Walter said. "It doesn't make it his." He tapped the line that said Diane to arrange POA, and his kindness got very quiet and very firm. "But this one, Ruth, this one you need to take to Raymond's estate lawyer, not because you're in any trouble, because you should see exactly what you're holding before anyone tries to hand you a pen." I drove home the long way, past the corner of the land where Raymond had set an iron stake 40 years ago, and I understood the thing they had counted on. They had counted on me not knowing what was mine. The appraisal was the part I was supposed to be angry about, but the appraisal was already behind me. It was the next line on their timeline that kept me awake, the month they had set aside, in advance, for the day I would sign myself away. Before I could stop that, I had to understand exactly what my signature was worth. So the morning came when I put on my good coat and drove to the square. The estate lawyer's office was in a brick building on the square, above a shoe store that had been there since I was a girl. Her name was Ellen Powell, and she had handled Raymond's affairs, and she remembered him. "Mr. Ruth's husband," she said, and then corrected herself with a small smile. "Raymond. He came in more than most. He was a careful man." "He was," I said. I put the spreadsheet on her desk. I told her, plainly, what my children had made and what the timeline said. I did not embroider it. "I have found that the truth is heavier when you set it down gently. Ellen Powell read it once, then read it again, and then she folded her hands. "Ruth," she said, "I want to tell you what your husband did, and I want to be honest about what it means and what it doesn't." She pulled a file. It was thick. "Raymond didn't predict this," she said, tapping the spreadsheet. "He wasn't a fortune teller. But over the years he'd come in and we'd talk, and the same worry kept coming back to him. He told me once that the kids had always divided things among themselves, even as children figured out who got what, before anyone asked the person who owned it. He worried it might not stop at popsicles. He never told me you should do any one thing," he said, more than once. "I just want to make sure Ruth has options and knows she has them. That's all this file is, options. The decisions were always going to be yours." I had not cried in that lawyer's office, and I did not intend to, but my throat closed for a moment, and I let it, and then it passed. "Then let us go through my options," I said. "All of them, and I will read every page." We started with the power of attorney, because that frightened me most. "You have never signed one," Ellen said. "Nothing your daughter drafted has any force. It's paper until your hand is on it, and your hand isn't. If you'd like, I can prepare a durable power of attorney of your own choosing, naming whomever you trust, and revoking any claim of authority anyone else asserts. But you choose the person, not me, not the timeline on this page." I thought of Diane's form, printed and ready, waiting for me to fall. "Walk me through it," I said. If I had signed her form the day she asked, what would she have been able to do? Ellen did not soften it. "Sign in your place, move money, enter into agreements. If it was broad enough, list property you still lived in. You'd have kept the title, Ruth, but you'd have handed her the pen that acts as if it were yours." I sat with that. I had come within one printed form and one polite Sunday of giving my daughter the authority to sell my life out from under me, all of it dressed up as being smart. The form had been ready since Christmas. Only my "I'll think about it" had stood between me and it, and I had said that sentence like a coward, not like a decision. "Then let us do it right," I said. I asked Ellen to name a neutral party I trusted. And we did. Not my daughter. Not my son. "A power of attorney is not a gift you owe someone for loving you," I said, mostly to myself. "It is a key, and you do not hand your key to the person who has been measuring your house." Ellen wrote that down. I think she liked it. Next was the land and the house. She confirmed what Walter had told me in the flat, wonderful language of records. Sole owner, no co-owner, no lien, no recorded claim, no mortgage, nothing anyone could sell, list, or promise. "An appraisal is a stranger's opinion of a number," she said. "A deed is the answer to a question, and the deed says the land is yours." Then the account. We drove. She followed me in her own car, which touched me more than I expected, to the bank, where the manager pulled my signature card. Mine was the only name on it. Diane had never been added, because I had never signed her form. The manager removed a note in the system that said Diane was authorized to discuss the account, a note I had never authorized, and looked genuinely sorry that it had ever been there. "No one can move what they cannot reach," I said, signing the card again in my own steady hand. "And they cannot reach what my name still holds." While we were at the bank, I asked about the safe deposit box. Raymond had kept one for years, and I had not been able to make myself open it since the funeral. They gave me the little key and left me alone in the small room. And I pulled the long drawer out and just looked at it for a while, before I touched anything. His handwriting was on everything. The deed in its careful folder, labelled in his square field letters. A rubber band he had wound around the marriage license, still holding. And underneath, a photograph I had forgotten existed. The two of us standing on the raw land the year we bought it, before there was a house, before there was anything but a line he had walked and a girl he had talked into marrying him. He is squinting at the camera. I am laughing at him. I put my hand flat on the folder and I stayed there longer than I needed to. This was the one drawer in the whole day that had nothing to do with winning. It was just him, keeping things safe the way he always did, still doing it 2 years after he was gone. I did not feel powerful in that room. I felt married. I took the photograph home and left the rest exactly as he had arranged it. Then Ellen did one more thing for me, and it was a small thing that mattered. She prepared a certified letter on her letterhead to be sent to both my children. It was not a threat. It said, in plain and courteous language, that no power of attorney had been authorized, that the property was solely mine and not for sale, and that any appraisal or listing arranged without my written consent had no standing. She read it aloud to me before she sent it. "A record does not raise its voice," she said when she finished. "It just states where the line is and waits." "That," I said, "is exactly what my husband did for a living." Back at Ellen's office, we came to the part that mattered most, the trust. Raymond, years ago, had set up a revocable trust and left it in my control, to do with as I saw fit. My children had assumed I could see it now in their neat columns, that everything would simply be split between the two of them when I was gone. They had built their spreadsheet on that assumption like a house on a lot they did not own. "You can leave it however you wish," Ellen said, "to them, away from them, to others, in shares, in trust. You decide, and you can change it again next month if you like. That is what revocable means. It answers to you and no one else, for as long as you draw breath." I thought about my grandchildren. There were 4 of them, David's 2 and Diane's 2, and I loved all 4 without measuring. And I thought about the one, Katie, Diane's oldest, who at Raymond's funeral had sat with me the whole long afternoon and asked me to tell her about the land, about the corner stake, about her grandfather's hands. "I want it to skip a generation," I said. "I want the house and the land and the account to pass to my grandchildren, all 4 in equal shares, held in trust until each of them turns 25. I keep everything, all of it, mine to use and live in and walk on for the rest of my life. When I'm gone, it goes to them, not to be sold in a hurry, to be kept." Ellen nodded and began to write. "And a trustee," I said. "A neutral one now. But I want Katie named to step in as trustee when she's old enough. She's the one who asked about the stakes. She'll understand that some things are meant to be held, not divided." We were there until the office lights outside had come on. I read every page. I read the parts that were dull and the parts that mattered, and Ellen never once rushed me. When it was done, I signed. My whole name. Ruth, in my own hand. The way Raymond taught me to make my letters plain enough for any clerk to read. The trust was recorded. The beneficiary forms on the insurance were changed to match. The power of attorney named a person I chose. I sat with the pen in my hand for a moment after the last signature. The paper did not make me strong. It only wrote down where no one could interrupt it, a thing that had always been true. Before I left, Ellen took a plain envelope from Raymond's file. My name was on it in his handwriting, the small square letters he used on his field notes. "He left this with me," she said. "He asked that you have it if you ever came in worried about the family and the estate. He was very specific that I shouldn't hand it to you for anything else. Only that." I did not open it there. I drove home and sat at my kitchen table under his clock, and I turned on the good lamp, and I opened it. "Ruth, if Ellen has given you this, then something is pulling at you about the family and about what we built. And you are sitting there, trying to decide the right thing while also trying not to think badly of anyone. I know you. You will have already forgiven them twice before you finish reading this sentence. I don't know what happened. I'm not writing to you like a man who saw the future, because I didn't. I only saw the same thing over and over for 40 years. You give people the benefit of the doubt until there is almost nothing left of the doubt, or of you. Here is the only thing I want to say. Please don't confuse peace with going along. They are not the same. though they can wear the same quiet face. Real peace is a thing you choose with your eyes open. Going along is a thing that happens to you while you are being kind. You do not owe anyone your signature. Not the kids, not me. Read every page, ask every question, even the ones that feel rude. Sign only what lets you sleep. The land will keep. It kept for my father, and it kept for us. Let it keep for whoever loves it enough to walk it. You'll know who that is. I'm not there to help you decide. I was never supposed to be. You always decided better than you thought you did. Raymond. I read it 3 times. I cried once, but not the way you cry when you are lost. I cried the way you cry when someone hands you your own coat in the cold, and you did not realize until that moment how long you had been shivering. He had not left me a trap for my children. He had not named a villain. He had left me a hand on the shoulder and permission to stand up straight. I folded the letter, put it in the small notebook I had started, and turned off the lamp. I knew what I would say when they came. And I knew I would say it quietly. They came the following Saturday, all together, the way you send a delegation. Diane came in first, brisk and warm at once, with a folder under her arm. David trailed behind, and Diane's husband stood by the door as if he might need to leave in a hurry. "We're so glad you had time to look everything over," Diane said, setting her folder on my table right where the spreadsheet had sat 2 Sundays before. "We just need the signed POA and the account form, and honestly, Mom, once the land sells in the fall, you won't have to worry about the taxes on all that acreage anymore. We're doing this for you." I offered them coffee. I always offer coffee. Diane waved it off. David took a cup and held it without drinking. "It's not about taking anything, Mum," David said, turning the cup. "You know that. It's a lot for one person. We're trying to make it easier." Then Diane's husband spoke from the doorway. He did not lower his voice, and he did not look uncomfortable, which told me more than anything either of them had said. "With respect, Ruth, this was all decided a while back," he said. "Everybody's just been waiting on you. We'd like to get moving before the fall." There it was, in the open, without a trace of shame. In his mind, the deciding was already done. I was not a person to be asked. I was the last signature holding up a schedule. I set down the coffee pot. Then I took my phone out of my apron pocket and laid it face up on the table. On the photograph I had taken 2 Sundays before, the whole spreadsheet still bright on the screen. "There isn't going to be a listing," I said. The room went still. "I read all of it." I went on, gently, because there was no need to be otherwise. "The columns. And the timeline underneath, where you'd already had my land appraised without asking me. And where you'd set aside the summer for the day I was supposed to sign myself over to Diane. Nobody slipped and told me. I photographed it in your sister's kitchen while my coffee cake went cold on the counter. Then I did what your father always did when someone told him where his line was. I went and checked the record. Mom, Diane started. "The land is mine, Diane, not ours, not the family's. Mine, on a deed your father and Walter recorded themselves. No one can sell it. No one can list it. The account has one name on it, and it is mine. I never signed your form, so there is no power of attorney, and there won't be one with your name on it. All of that I've now put in writing, properly, and it's recorded." David finally looked at me. "You went to a lawyer." "I went to your father's lawyer," I said. "I read every page. I signed in my own hand. When I'm gone, everything goes to the 4 grandchildren, held in trust until they're old enough to be careful with it. Not to be sold in a hurry. Kept." Diane's face changed then, and I will not pretend it did not hurt me to watch it. But it did not change into shame. It changed into something worse. "We spent weeks on this, Mom," she said. "We were trying to take things off your plate so you wouldn't have to carry it alone. I don't understand why you're turning something we did for you into something ugly." She believed it. That was the part I had to sit with. She had drawn up a chart of my life and scheduled the surrender of it, and in her own heart, she had done me a kindness. "I'm not turning it into anything, Diane," I said. "I'm only reading it back to you out loud. You're the one who wrote it down." I looked at my son, and I said the thing I had come to say to him most of all. "Diane made the spreadsheet, David, but you're the one who printed it. You set that meeting at your sister's table, and you set a place for me right beside the sale of your father's land, like I was a number that could be talked into agreeing. She may have said it, but you sat there while she did, and you turned your coffee cup, and you let it be planned around me while I stood in the doorway holding a cake." He opened his mouth. I could see the apology forming, quick and easy, the kind that wants to close a wound before it has been looked at. "Not yet," I said, and I said it kindly. "Some apologies need to be held a while before they can be answered. I'm not shutting the door on you. But I'm not going to hand you my piece to make you feel better tonight either." They left not long after. There was nothing more to arrange, because there had never been anything of mine that was theirs to arrange. I walked them out and I closed my front door, and I turned the lock, and the sound of it was not anger, it was just the end of a sentence. Katie came on her own the next week. No delegation, no folder. She knocked on the back door, the kitchen door, the way family does, and she was holding a grocery bag she had not been asked to bring. Bread and cheese and a carton of eggs. And she looked like she might cry before she got a word out. "Grandma," she said, "I saw the spreadsheet. My name was in one of the columns, and I never said I wanted any of it. I didn't even know what it was until it was already printed. I should have said something. I'm sorry I just sat there. I made us grilled cheese. It is the thing I know how to do when words are hard." I stood at the stove and she sat at the table where the spreadsheet had been, and the smell of butter filled the kitchen. And for a while, neither of us said anything difficult. "Tell me about the corner steak," she said finally, the way she had at the funeral. "The iron one, Grandpa's." So I told her how Raymond set it 40 years ago, how he'd walk out some mornings just to make sure it hadn't moved, how he said, "A good line doesn't argue with you. It just tells you the truth and waits." "I named you trustee," I told her. "Not now, someday, when you're ready. The land and the house go to you and your brother and your cousins, equal shares when I'm gone. I wanted someone in charge who understands that some things are meant to be kept, not split up in a spreadsheet." She was quiet. Then she said, "I won't sell the land, Grandma." "I know," I said. "That's why it's you." I did not pretend the rest of the family was healed. I did not tell her that her mother and I were fine, because we were not yet. I loved Katie, without erasing what had happened at that table. A person can do both. I learned that at 71, later than I should have. She stayed until dark, and she washed the pan without being asked, the good way, and she hugged me at the door, and meant it. The fall came, and there was no listing, because there was nothing to list. The realtor stopped calling once he understood there was no seller. The appraisal became what it always was, a stranger's number on a piece of paper about land that was never his to sell. Diane and I speak now, carefully, on the phone, about small things. It is not what it was. It may never be. I have made my peace with not knowing. David surprised me. He came by one Saturday with no trailer, and no folder, and no plan, and he rehung a gutter that had been sagging since before his father died. He did not mention the spreadsheet. When he left, he said, "I'll come by and look at Mom's porch steps next week." Mom's porch, Mom's steps. He had started saying it again, the small word he had let slip out of his sentences, and I noticed, and I did not make anything of it out loud. Walter came out in October and helped me find the iron corner stake in the tall grass. We reset it plumb, the two of us, an old woman and an old man, on their knees in the cold dirt, laughing about how Raymond would have made us do it twice. Then I went inside and planted paperwhites in the kitchen window, the way I do every fall, so there would be something white and stubborn blooming by Christmas. I changed the locks that autumn. I also raked the leaves and put up a new porch light. A woman can do both of those on the same afternoon and mean the same thing by them. Tonight I am sitting at the kitchen table under Raymond's clock, with the small notebook open in front of me and the paper whites just starting to bud in the window. I have written one line on the last page I filled. They made a project out of my life and passed the pieces around a table. But an estate was never a group assignment. It was one quiet decision, and the hand that signed it was always going to be mine. Sometimes dignity does not arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives at 4 in the morning, at your own kitchen table, in the plain letters of a name you have written 10,000 times, on a page that answers a question no one thought to ask you. Out in the dark, past the window, the land is still there. The corner stake stands plumb. And somewhere in a drawer at a lawyer's office is a folder that says, in language no spreadsheet can argue with, that all of it was always, only, mine to give.